to leaders, battles
Stalingrad factories were fought inch by inch.
to inventions.
Producing the wonder drug penicillin.
Warfare has shaped our lives,
Girls are able to release men for the fighting regiments.
driven by a century of technological innovation
Home in on their targets by radar.
3, 2, 1.
and pushing soldiers to the edge.
Blue leader here. Watch it, fellows.
The race for the tactical advantage is often the decisive contest in the war. These are the top tens of warfare. In this episode, we identify and rank the greatest inventions of warfare, ranking each in terms of technical innovation, world-changing influence, iconic status, and overall war-winning impact. First up in our top 10 inventions, synthetic rubber. Invented in 19th century and developed during World War II. Used in the production of gas masks, tanks, warplanes, and warships. By 1945, 50 million pounds produced per year. During World War II, rubber is extremely important. A half-ton of material is needed to build a single heavy bomber. 150,000 pounds of materials is needed to produce a battleship. And each soldier in the military requires 32 pounds of rubber for footwear, clothing, and equipment. But there's a problem. The natural rubber-producing nations in the Far East are in the hands of the Japanese, which leaves the Allies in a rubber emergency.
Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island.
For the United States, there's a real danger the war could be lost unless scientists are able to replace almost 1 million tons of natural rubber with a synthetic substitute within 18 months. Chemists produce an effective man-made alternative, putting on public displays to show the wonder material in action. Mass production becomes an essential wartime industry, employing millions who work round-the-clock shifts. Huge vats of powdered chemicals are mixed to produce different grades of rubber. The liquid is then pumped along pipes, leading to reactors, where the mixture binds together to form rubber. Here, it's pressed into blocks, ready to be shaped into products. The amount of rubber production during World War II is staggering. In 1942, the U.S. produces just 3,000 tons. By 1945, 50 factories pour out 750,000 tons. Twice that of the world's natural rubber production before the beginning of the war. And among rubber's many uses is one potentially life-saving product: gas masks. Troops practice combat fully equipped with new airtight protection. And the general public also prepares for the worst.
You should have your gas mask with you always. Your mask is of the greatest importance to you, so have it tested regularly by the warden. Learn to put it on quickly. It can be adjusted in a matter of seconds. If you wear spectacles, take them off first. If you're wearing a hat, take it off calmly but quickly. Always hold your breath so that you don't take gas into your lungs. Take your gas mask by the side straps. Push your chin forward into it. Pull the straps over the head as far as possible. And run your fingers along the rubber part.
The airtight rubber casing forms an essential improvement on previous designs.
Wherever you go, have your gas mask with you always.
Some families even try rubber-lined gas-proof strollers. The much-feared gas attacks never come, but rubber production plays another critical role.
A new type of synthetic rubber tire that seemingly does the impossible. In war, if the tire is punctured by a bullet, the truck can easily get back to its base before the tire disintegrates. Like that.
In 1942, it's estimated that tires are needed for 30 million cars, buses, and trucks in the U.S. alone. The man-made rubber is an important target for Allied bombers. June 1944. Operation Point Blank Directive plans to knock out the production of fighter planes.
By 1944, strategic bombing is being conducted by both the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command and the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe.
Among the key targets, rubber factories in Germany and Italy, which together produce over 120,000 tons per year.
RAF Bomber Command do attack oil targets such as rubber synthetic plants, and if you damage that capacity, you damage the industry, you damage the ability to transport industry, and therefore you start to bring Germany to its knees.
Today, more than 70% of rubber production is synthetic, and it's a core component in the modern military gear. Every army has rubber-sealed protection against a chemical attack. And man-made rubber comes into our top 10 inventions at number 10. Next up is a technology that changes the rules of combat. Kuwait, 1991. Saddam's Iraqi armored divisions fiercely defend its position. Running battles in Operation Desert Storm push coalition forces to the limit. But one new innovation is key to gaining a tactical advantage. A device that soldiers in previous wars could only have dreamed of. And comes into our list at number 9, the Global Positioning System, or GPS. First used on the battlefields of the Gulf War, 1991. Today, 24 satellites provide 24/7 global coverage. Radio signals transmit data that is accurate within 16 feet.
It was a kind of super map and compass. What GPS is really good at is three-dimensional, real-time situational awareness, and that is of immense value on the battlefield because it speeds up decision-making.
GPS devices enable commanders to locate their team members quickly and accurately.
The key thing about GPS in Desert Storm was that forces who are moving around the desert, who would be spending normally a lot of time trying to work out where they are, know exactly where they are. They can follow a route which their GPS will take them on.
Because using GPS takes away the need for fixed markers on the ground, commanders can shift their attack plans at any moment.
The operation was massively successful. It was conducted in very, very difficult conditions. The armies involved were used to fighting at night. They were used to fighting for long periods. Luckily, the troops, the key troops involved, had GPS, which was a battle-winning weapon at that stage.
The U.S. Department of Defense begins the GPS project in 1973. Its purpose? To give the military a high-tech navigation system. The first GPS satellite is launched in 1978, but it takes another 20 years before the system is fully operational. This is how it works. Satellites provide global coverage. Powered by solar energy and equipped with a precise atomic clock, each satellite orbiting the Earth continuously broadcasts a signal of time and position. A GPS receiver on the ground uses simultaneous readings from 3 different satellites to fix the user's position, and all this in just a few seconds. GPS works in any weather conditions, anywhere in the world, 24/7. By the Gulf War, the system isn't yet fully operational, with only 16 of the intended 24 satellites in position. But it still works.
It was like magic. I suddenly knew where I was all the time. And this was a complete change.
Today, GPS has developed to give soldiers even more battlefield information.
Now, as it's become more integrated into digital systems, your GPS can automatically report where you are. It can integrate that with reports coming from neighboring units, neighboring vehicles, so you know where your own side are. But you can integrate it also with targeting equipment.
And that means GPS-guided missiles.
GPS will calculate where that target is. You can then put that target into a guided missile system, which is also controlled by GPS, and you can get a precise hit on that target with a guided weapon.
By 1996, because of its global and commercial possibilities, the U.S. government opens the system to the general public.
In a half mile, make a right turn.
Today, GPS helps us get around, but its primary purpose remains as a military tool. Coming in at number 9 in our top 10 is GPS.
Warfare is an enormous driver of scientific and especially, I think, medical change as well. The best place to learn to be a surgeon, the best place to learn the speed that you need, the efficiency that you need, the techniques you need to save somebody's life in an emergency, the place you learn those is on the battlefield.
In World War I, the biggest challenge for frontline medics is dealing with shrapnel wounds.
Medicine is driven by the challenges of the First World War, the terrible new kinds of injuries that are being inflicted by high explosive shells and high velocity bullets.
One of the most challenging types of wounds affect the face.
If you think about the nature of trench warfare, it's a kind of warfare that frequently exposes the head and shoulders. Think about going over the top. Think about kind of peering over a trench to try and see the enemy. Something like 15% of all troops in the First World War who are severely wounded enough to need evacuation have severe facial injuries.
At number 8 in our top 10 inventions is a pioneering medical advance, facial reconstructive surgery, better known as plastic surgery. Plastic surgery gets its name from the Greek word for sculpting, plastique. New techniques are developed during World War I. 2,000 patients needed facial surgery after the Battle of the Somme alone.
One of the big challenges facing surgeons who are trying to deal with these wounds is that it's not just a matter of stitching up cuts. These are very often wounds in which a lot of tissue, and often very important and complex tissue, has simply been blown away. It isn't there anymore.
Step forward, pioneering surgeon Harold Gillies. 35 years old when World War I breaks out, Gillies realizes that some facial wounds will never heal on their own. They'll need major facial reconstruction.
The big problem he's facing is how do you replace missing tissue?
In 1917, Gillies creates a specialist hospital in England and begins perfecting techniques of plastic surgery.
Gillies was certainly seen by a later generation of surgeons as the father of plastic surgery. Probably the most important technique that Gillies develops is what's called the tubed pedicle graft.
Gillies takes skin from another part of the body and grafts it onto the patient's face. There, he allows it to heal and develop blood vessels before carefully positioning the new skin onto the wound.
This becomes the central technique for doing plastic surgery.
At Gillies Hospital, 11,000 operations are performed on over 5,000 men.
Early plastic surgery was not a quick business. Patients treated by Gillies would very often be in hospital for a year, 18 months, something like that, and would undergo 5, 6, maybe even a dozen operations.
A generation later, and in World War II, the techniques are further perfected. Although many patients remain scarred, surgery repairs their most serious wounds. And these patients paved the way for decades more of surgical innovation. Born out of the brutality of war, life-saving plastic surgery makes it into our top 10 at number 8. Next up on our list, a handheld device that changes warfare.
The Second World War is really the scientists' war. So many of the important victories depend upon new technologies.
December 1944, Belgium. After the Allied invasion, Hitler launches a massive counterattack, aiming to split the Allied forces of France, Britain, Canada, and the United States. Lasting 4 months, the fight becomes known as the Battle of the Bulge. But one new technology gives the US a critical advantage. At number 7 in our top 10 is the walkie-talkie. Invented in 1937 by Canadian Donald Hings. First used in battle by US Army Signal Corps. Walkie-talkies are the precursor of the modern cell phone.
If you stop and think of the great developments of World War II, rockets, bombs, guns, tanks, you could write a list of 100 and you probably wouldn't put down one of the most important, and that's the humble walkie-talkie. Just think of what it meant. If you're attacking or being attacked, what you want to know is, where are the troops? What are they doing? You want to give commands. It was a question of being able to say, look out behind you in real time.
The first model weighs around 6 pounds and has a range of just under a mile. But for the infantrymen and paratroopers, it's a game changer. In 1943, 50,000 walkie-talkies are shipped to the battlefields in Europe by the US Army Signal Corps.
The walkie-talkie was important because of several factors. First, it was very robust. That's the main thing. Second, it was portable. It was extremely heavy. It wasn't a light item. But most important of all, you could train anybody to use it within 5 minutes. And once they could use it, they had an advantage over the enemy that nobody could ever have expected.
Today, fighters around the world continue to use the walkie-talkies for fast, cheap, and efficient communications. But its influence has spread far beyond the battlefield. The walkie-talkie is the precursor to the cell phone.
Of course, walkie-talkie is everywhere with us now. Basically speaking, that's what our cell phones are all about. And you can trace the cell phone right back to the walkie-talkie of World War II.
The two-way radio is now common around the world in police forces, industry, and at home. First used to help beat back the Nazis in World War II, the world's first handheld device, the walkie-talkie, makes it into our top 10 at number 7. From 1940 to 1943, Allied and Axis forces fight across North Africa in a series of epic battles. In the air, German bombers pummel Allied positions. Critical to their defense are anti-aircraft guns.
One of the most difficult engineering challenges in the Second World War was shooting down incoming aircraft, German bombers. Why was this so hard? Because the aircraft were coming in faster than ever before and higher than ever before.
To set the most effective angle for their guns, they must be pre-calculated.
Calculating that trajectory, including the time that was needed to set the timer for the shell, was a significant challenge.
The solution is the world's first programmable computer. Developed in 1943, the computer weighs over 66,000 pounds. It is 1,000 times faster than its predecessor. The computer is used in the development of the atomic bomb.
The history of computing is really linked to the history of air defense in the Second World War.
Ministries of Defence or the Department of Defence invested quite heavily in the development of computers in the early days, as they were very much the foundation of development of technology.
In 1943, a machine at the University of Pennsylvania is making calculations. It's called Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, or ENIAC for short.
ENIAC was the first machine that could be programmed in order to compute a specific operation. The key invention was that computing could be done electronically, with tubes instead of mechanically.
The ENIAC covers 1,829 square feet of floor space and weighs just over 66,000 pounds. It contains 18,000 vacuum tubes, 70,000 resistors, 10,000 capacitors, 1,500 relays, and 6,000 manual switches. Designing the correct configuration for each new program takes days.
The programming was very difficult. Lots of switches and plugs needed to be repositioned by a lot of people. So it was clumsy by today's standards, but it could be programmed.
Once programmed, the machine is 1,000 times faster than any other calculating machine to date. In a single second, it can perform 5,000 additions, 357 multiplications, or 38 divisions.
That was fascinating at the time. People started to talk about mechanical brains and big brains at the time because the machines were so big. And that was a huge step in the history of computing.
Among the computer's tasks is to design the atomic bomb.
It's difficult to imagine the atomic bomb being developed, certainly so quickly, maybe even at all, outside of the context of the Second World War. It's a remarkable example of scientists from many different disciplines coming together with engineers, with the military, with new kinds of funding to produce an incredibly powerful strategic technology. I think in simple technical terms, one can see the atomic bomb as one of the greatest examples of warfare pushing forward science and science pushing forward warfare.
Larger than most houses, the first computers paved the way for the digital age. In the 1950s, calculating machines take on speedier systems. Transistors replace valves, and electronics rapidly advance. By the 1980s, computers become common in the workplace. Personal organizers become handheld. Today, it's difficult to imagine a world without computers.
I think this link between man and machine has become closer than even the pioneers in the 1940s could have imagined.
It's with the invention of this calculation machine during World War II that the modern computer is born. We're down to the final 5 of the top 10 inventions of warfare. Up next at number 5 is the Predator drone. Wingspan, 55 feet. Operational range, 1,150 miles, or 40 hours. Capable of reconnaissance and combat roles. First launched in 1994, the Predator can be controlled from any base in the world.
Perhaps the most famous drone at the moment, the Predator, was first seen over Bosnia in 1995.
The Predator is capable of flying continuous patrols over hostile territory. Engineered by the U.S. Air Force and CIA, the advantages of these high-tech drones are obvious.
It's all about precision, and it's all about deep, dirty, dangerous. If it's dirty in the sense you're in a high-risk environment, you don't want to risk your aircrew. It's controlled via satellite, and it could be controlled by anywhere.
A 101 horsepower engine turns the main drive shaft, which rotates the Predator's 2-blade rear-mounted propeller, providing drive and lift. The remote pilot can alter the pitch of the blades to change the altitude of the plane and reach speeds of up to 135 miles per hour. And the Predator can reach altitudes of up to 25,000 feet.
The great advantage of it is it's almost impossible to see at altitude and difficult to hear. So it has a stealth capability.
Predator drones are loaded with a high-tech surveillance kit.
They will have cameras, which will allow them to video in real time. So from 30,000 feet or so, you can identify a face. They will have radar systems, which will allow them to see through bad weather, and also pick up different types of information. Some of them will have infrared, which allows them to detect body heat. And some will also have signals intelligence capabilities, which will allow them to listen in to communications on the ground.
The U.S. Air Force has built over 300 Predators, and they're not just used to spy from the sky.
While 90–95% of the time a platform like a Predator will be used for surveillance, it is also a strike platform.
So you've got two things you can do. You can go and spy with this, or you can go and spy and then strike, so you can carry missiles or bombs.
The combat version of Predator is armed with 2 laser-guided Hellfire missiles. For the advances in pilotless combat and aerial reconnaissance, the drone makes it into our top 5.
One of the most high-pressure situations in which humanity finds itself is warfare. There's an immense pressure, an immediate pressure to find new technologies, to find new ways of keeping soldiers alive. These technologies suddenly become vitally important to national interest, to winning the war.
During World War II, blood transfusion techniques reach new levels of sophistication. Immunization against tetanus is developed and refined.
We can see new drugs coming out of warfare.
But for most of the war, there's one major killer that medics can't beat.
Many more soldiers die of wound infections in this period than actually die of wounds.
The answer is a medical breakthrough that comes in our list at number 4, the pioneering antibiotic, penicillin. Discovered in 1928, over 2 million doses are available to the Allies before D-Day. By 1945, U.S. production reaches 650 billion units per month.
These pictures show scientific workers in a British Commonwealth laboratory producing the wonder drug penicillin.
Antibiotics were a game changer in medicine, one of the greatest revolutions ever.
In each of these bottles, partly filled, penicillin will be produced. The bottles are laid in racks and corked with cotton wool.
Penicillin's significance to the military is that it enables them to treat a very old and intractable problem, which is wound infection.
The wonder drug is discovered in 1928 by British medic Alexander Fleming. A former soldier in the trenches of World War I, he examines the effects of mold on bacteria. Fleming finds that some molds kill bacteria, and that has the potential to stop infection spreading in soldiers' wounds. He calls this antibiotic penicillin.
When the Second World War breaks out, it's very clear that penicillin has the possibility to become a really powerful strategic technology. Any army that has penicillin and can treat its soldiers with it will be far more effective on the battlefield than an army that doesn't have penicillin.
But there's a problem.
Very quickly it becomes clear that this is a very effective drug, but there are big problems. How do you grow enough penicillium mold to extract it? How do you turn that extract into a practical drug?
Step forward, Howard Florey. In 1940, Florey takes a small package of the precious mold to the United States, and after 3 years of tests and trials, mass production eventually begins.
Penicillin is derived from mold. Now the mold spores are introduced to the bottles with a spray gun. The mold grows rapidly on its corn liquor diet, which when fresh is like this. 2 days later, the growth has begun. On the 10th day, a large growth of mold has formed. The drug produced by the mold is now a solution in the bottle.
The moldy mix is collected onto trays. The solution is drained off and pumped to a cooling room. Then, in glass tubes attached to a vacuum, the moisture is dried out until only crystals are left. Incredibly, 2 million doses are available to the Allies before the invasion of France.
By 1944, enough penicillin is being produced that when Allied troops go into Normandy on D-Day, they take the drug with them in very large quantities. And it does turn out to be a lifesaver.
By injecting the drug into a wounded area and preventing infection on the battlefield, penicillin saves countless lives. Even Winston Churchill credits his cure of pneumonia to penicillin. Today, the use of antibiotics is common.
Penicillin changed the world. Penicillin has made a difference to all of our lives. We've all taken antibiotics. We all live in the world made possible by penicillin and by this work in the 1940s.
Penicillin was developed as a drug only because World War II came along. Without the war, we would never have had penicillin when we did.
The wonder drug penicillin is number 4 in our top 10. Next up is a war-winning defense technology. In 1940, in the skies over Northern Europe, a fight to the death is underway in the Battle of Britain. But one new technology gives the defenders the edge: radar. Invented in 1935, the term radar is short for radio detection and ranging. In 1945, there are over 100 radar stations around the UK. Radar is used today by air traffic controllers around the world.
Radar really is the beginning of extrasensory perception. It's beyond the capability of a human being. So for the military, this means they can see further than a human can.
The great thing about radar is it gives you that eye in the dark or in bad weather.
Radar is an object detection system that uses radio waves to determine the range, altitude, direction, or speed of objects. The signal formation is relayed to operations rooms and battle planners.
Here is the method by which a large war factory or a whole city can be protected by the vigilant echo of radar.
Fighter Command's strategy for defending the UK was centered around being able to react to incoming attacks. Central to this was its command and control system centered on radar.
Radar stations around the UK give the British a warning signal of up to an hour before the enemy planes attack.
What they wanted to do was have an integrated defense system in Britain that would allow them to detect aircraft coming from the continent, their height and their speed, to be able to put fighter aircraft into the right position to intercept them. So if you like, it's a simple bit of physics and maths that's required.
Today, air traffic controllers around the world rely on upgraded systems of radar to manage our busy skies safely. Unmatched as a groundbreaking technology of defense, radar earns its place in our list at number 3. Still to come, our top 2 inventions that changed the face of warfare. June 13th, 1944. 1 week after D-Day, Nazi Germany launches one of its most feared weapons. The V-1 flying bomb, known as the Doodlebug, is a jet-propelled missile. Over 9,000 V-1s are fired into southeast England. Britain needs a new defense. The answer? An aircraft that's powered by the next invention on our list, the jet engine. The first turbojet is engineered by Frank Whittle in 1937. The first jet fighter takes off in 1939. Jet engines today power all commercial airliners.
The jet engine was the holy grail of propulsion for aeroplanes in the 1930s and 1940s.
The introduction of the jet engine is a real step change in military technology.
For decades, experiments with jets have mixed results. On tracks, on bikes, in cars, and even attempt flights from launch pads.
Everyone wanted to go faster and faster. The problem you've got with the jet engine in those days is you don't have the metal skills, either in terms of production or in terms of working. You don't have that reliability which allows the thrust to be maintained. And actually, the science there was difficult.
In the 1930s, the British designer Frank Whittle has the answer, the world's very first jet engine. So how does it work? Inside the engine, blades spin at high speed, which compresses the air. This compressed air is then sprayed with fuel, and an electric spark lights it up. The burning gases expand and blast out through the nozzle at the back of the engine. As the jets of gas shoot backwards, the engine and the aircraft thrust forward. The British may have harnessed the power of the jet engine first, but they aren't the first to take it into the skies. The Messerschmitt Me-262 is the world's first fully operational jet fighter. Over 1,000 are produced, but only around 200 ever make it to frontline squadrons. As well as the first operational jet fighter, the Germans also produce the world's first jet-powered bomber, the Arado AR-234. Used mainly for reconnaissance, it proves to be nearly impossible to intercept. On the Allied side, the only operational jet aircraft during the war is the Gloucester Meteor. Its mission, to take down V-1 flying bombs, eventually accounting for 14 successful kills. By the 1950s, the jet engine powers every new generation of combat aircraft, the Russian MiGs and the US Phantoms.
The jet engine obviously not only has its military origins, but it's eventually used in civilian aircraft. And of course, the real advantage in that is that the jet engine and jet engine civilian airliners have essentially shrunk the world.
This jetliner, the Comet, is the first passenger jet to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in 1958.
So it's been revolutionary in the way that we travel the world.
The jet engine propels itself onto our top 10 inventions at number 2. Top of our list is the Internet. Developed in 1963 by the US Department of Defense, the first email is sent in 1971. Today, there are over 1 billion websites. Initially proposed by the United States Air Force in the early 1960s, the first interconnected computers share communications between 2 military facilities. It's the height of the Cold War, and the fear of a nuclear attack is a real threat.
The motivation was to design a command and control network that the military could use even under nuclear attack. The idea was that a network of command and control centers is more resilient, can basically manage to survive even nuclear war.
By the 1970s, researchers at UCLA in California develop a system they call ARPANET. It connects to universities on the other side of the US, thousands of miles away.
Well, the interface message processor, fondly known as an IMP, was the first piece of networking equipment ever on the ARPANET, which then became the internet. So it was the first piece of internet equipment. When that happened, we had the first breath that the internet ever took, first breath of life, when messages went back from a networking piece of equipment to the outside world.
In the early 1970s, interconnected computers opened the door to another revolutionary new technology: email. Within 2 years, there are hundreds of military email users.
You know, the early days, we wanted machines to talk to each other. That was the driving element. In 1972, when we introduced email, it suddenly took over the network. All the traffic on the network was email, basically. And at that point, I realized that what was important was not the machine-to-machine communication, it was the people-to-people communication. And that's what's been driving the internet.
Based out of the Pentagon, throughout the 1970s and 80s, the internet serves as the backbone of military communications. But by the 1990s, the wider implications of the technology become obvious. Today, over 100 billion emails are sent every day. And nearly 40% of the world's population has used the services of the internet. The instantaneous transfer of information has also ushered in a new type of war: cyber war.
The internet spread and rose in the 1990s. And as this happened, first what we saw were hackers. And only in the late 1990s, by about mid-1998, was the internet becoming a space where countries, governments, and militaries were beginning to think about battle.
In response to the potential threat, today, NATO keeps a cyber reaction team on permanent watch. But it's not weapon systems or militaries that are the main target. It's information.
People thought cyber war could mean something like an electronic Pearl Harbor. But then became clear that cyber war actually wasn't exploding logic bombs or breaking things. Cyber war or cyber attacks were really stealing information clandestinely, secretly, without you even noticing it. That has become the norm today.
Originally invented as a tool of communication to survive a nuclear war, the internet continues to shape our lives and is #1 in our list.